Morning. Morning. Y'all gotta give me a little better than that. Come on now. Good morning. Good morning. Hey, there you go. So Frequency is my stage name when I'm doing poetry, and they asked me to come share some poems with y'all today. But my real name is Mwende Katwiwa, and I'm an immigrant to this country from Kenya. So I wanted to take a moment before I shared what I was going to share for this conference and honor the lives that were lost recently at the attack at Garissa University and share this piece that I wrote last week. It's called The U.S. Questions Garissa. If a gun is shot, and both trigger and bullet have only known the taste of strange fruit and the seeds they grow from, will the world call it tragedy? Or will we wolves open our Tartarus throats, howl thanks for this daily feast, pick the coarse coils of your lamb's wool hair from our teeth, use them to clean the barrel of the gun we gift wrapped and left at your baby shower, and call it Thursday? So I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about the intersection of arts, social justice, and activism, because that's how I came into this work. I currently work at Women with a Vision, which is a social justice nonprofit down in New Orleans, and we focus on issues of reproductive justice, sex worker advocacy, HIV/AIDS, drug policy reform, and just different issues that impact marginalized women down in New Orleans. Me personally, I came to the organization right after college, and my personal introduction to activism and social justice was through arts, specifically through poetry, and the power that comes from being able to provide counter narratives and being able to give voice to communities that don't traditionally have the power to do so. A few people who've come before me talking about the 1 in 3 campaign have really talked to the power of giving stories, and stories specifically that come from communities that are not able to tell their stories. One of the things that attracted me to Women with a Vision is in their mission statement they wrote, "We envision an environment in which there is no war against women's bodies, in which women have spaces to come together and share their stories, to empower themselves to make decisions concerning their bodies and lives, where they have necessary support to realize their hopes, dreams, and full potential." One of the things we like to say in Women with a Vision is that we have two different camps of people who come into the office. There's the people who come from the public health field, and there's the people who come from the social justice and activism fields. I'm one of the people who come from that activism field, specifically, like I said, from the storytelling fields. And one of the things that Women with a Vision has really been able to do is provide a space for our clients to come in and say, wow, this is the first place that people have really been able to listen to me, listen to my story, and allow me to define myself, who I am, and what I need, and what my needs are, and how I will handle the entirety of all that. So as we sit here and as we're fighting this movement, specifically right now in this Black Lives Matter movement, where so many stories are being told for us of what's going on the ground, what these protesters are doing, what these riots are doing, it's so important that as we're on the ground fighting, that we're also creating our own work that's really telling a historical record of what we're doing, what's going on, reflecting our stories internally. I wanted to share one piece with you specifically that I wrote the day that, I started writing the day that Mike Brown was killed, and it was a response to what was happening in Ferguson. When Trayvon Martin was killed, I went to a rally that we had in New Orleans, and I had a sign. I didn't even think about it when I was making a sign, but the sign said, "I fear having a son." I was 21 years old at the time, and I sat there with that sign, and I thought about it, and Dion Haywood, who is actually the executive director of Women with a Vision, she came and she gave this really inspirational speech and rallying speech that made me really think, outside of the perspective of myself as a young Black person in America who lives in a body that could potentially be targeted, what would happen if I was to recreate, to reproduce, which is something I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to be a mother. So I wrote this piece starting from that perspective of not myself, but what would happen to myself if I became a mother in this country. It's called The Joys of Motherhood. I've always wanted to be a mother. Growing up, I heard all about the joys of motherhood, from the first day of school to watching my kids graduate. I even looked forward to the apprehension of watching them go on their first dates. I knew I was young, but I figured it couldn't hurt to start planning for something so big, so early. But now, I'm 23 years old, and I don't know if I have what it takes to stomach motherhood in this country. Over the years, America has taught me more about parenting than any book on the subject, has taught me how some women give birth to babies and others to suspects, has taught me that this body will birth kin who are more likely to be held in prison cells than to hold college degrees. There is something about being Black in America that has made motherhood seem complicated. Seem like I don't know what to do to raise my kids right and keep them alive. Do I tell my son not to steal because it is wrong or because they will use it to justify his death? Do I tell him that even if he pays for his Skittles and sweet tea, there will still be those in the neighborhood that will watch him and see criminal before child, who will call the police and not wait for them to come? Do I even want the police to come? Too many Sean bells go off in my head when I consider calling 911. I will not take it for Oscar granted that they will not come and kill my son. So we may have gotten rid of the nooses, but I still consider it lynching when they murder black boys and leave their bodies to rot in the sun, as a historical reminder that there is something about being black in America that has made motherhood sound like mourning. Sound like one morning I could wake up and see my son as a repeat of last week's story. Sound like I could wake up and realize the death of my daughter wouldn't even be newsworthy. You can't tell me Renisha McBride is the only black woman whose violence deserves more than our silence. What about our other dark-skinned daughters in distress whose deaths we have yet to remember? Apparently, gender is not that great of a protector if you come out of a body that looks like this. There is something about being black in America that has made motherhood sound like something I'm not sure I look forward to. I have written too many poems about dead black children to be naive, about the fact that there could one day be a poem written about my kids, but I do not want to be a mother who gave birth to poems. I do not want a stanza for a son, nor a line for a little girl. I do not want children who will live forever in the pages of poetry yet can't seem to outlive me.